Hello and welcome to our web chat on how AI, artificial intelligence, will improve treasurer bank engagement. We are joined by Alenka Grealish, Senior Analyst from Celent, and she has had over 20 years experience of consulting and research, as well as working for leading banks. She's also worked for leading consultancies, including Celent, where she is now, the Boston Consulting Group. We're going to be discussing how AI could improve the bank treasury working practices, which is based on Alenka's report for Celent, the Cognitive Corporate Bank heading towards the summit. We're going to be looking at this overall problem of how it will improve corporate treasurer banking operations. Alenka, can you explain, this is taken from your report, what's going on here? You say AI is bringing a myriad of innovation to corporate banking, but is it everywhere?
Very, very good question. So what I was attempting to achieve in this framework is to show, based on relative maturity, which is vertical access, where are we? Because there's a lot of hyperbole around AI in banking, and less discussion on the commercial side of the house and on the retail side of the house. So on the commercial side, if we look at the far right, we see that in the back office, where there's a lot of repetitive processes, a lot of paper, AI has made quite a few inroads across payment processing, compliance, and payments. But as we move towards the customer touch points, processes that customers feel, even if they don't see the process, it's not as mature. But advancements are being made. For instance, in KYC onboarding, one of the more painful processes for both the bank and the customer, we're seeing inroads, and that's because there's a lot of, when you're dealing with a large corporate multinational, there's a lot of data, and much of it is unstructured. It's found in footnotes of financial statements. There's new data sources, the web, news, customer reviews, complaints, government data sources. So now with rising computing power, cheaper, faster, also cheaper data storage in the cloud, we're able to build these models. And inroads started, of course, in academia. Really, the adoption by enterprise, the Facebook, Googles, happened in just the past 8 years. So we've kind of seen this fast forward from what started in the 1950s. We're seeing this fast forward. And in KYC in particular, where there is a lot of unstructured data and it's unclear who knows who, power of AI to bring this web of connections of parent entities, subsidiary, suppliers, into visual, graphic, analytics, and audit trails, it's quite powerful.
Are there real results though? Because KYC is the bane of an awful lot of corporate treasurers' lives. They get asked for the things again and again.
There is. Now, it's very hard to go from pilot to production. So production has often been smaller sets of data or specific region. But in these production initiatives, time has been reduced by at least half. So that's pretty powerful. And more important, the number of times a customer has to be pinged for data has been reduced by, in one case that I know, 1/3. So the customer feels less redundancy and can you send this again, etc., and sees the cycle time shortened. Plus, you can use machine learning to gauge when the process will be complete, so you can let a customer know that they're 2/3 of the way, and the probability of being 100% is, in the time, is likely another 3 days or plus or minus a half a day or something like that. So you can give some transparency to the customer, which customers, of course, always appreciate.
AI is also usable in these other areas at the front office. Where are success stories?
In the front office, the most mature is something that touches the customer, but functional areas such as accounts receivable, payables. So similar to back office functions at a bank, this is an area where typically there's a lot of paper, and in particular in accounts receivable, you're trying to match a payment and a piece of paper or an email or an item in a web URL, and it becomes very challenging for your client in accounts receivable to achieve anything above a 50% straight through reconciliation rate. So when you have AI that can take whatever, and you could have bots involved doing the repetitive structured data analysis, AI can come in and extract that unstructured, the data in the notes, and push those straight through reconciliation rates to above 90%, which is really can save on time and other important processes. Quickly gets linked to a treasurer's goal of working capital optimization, shipper's goal of getting stuff off their dock and to the customer. So it has a lot of positive secondary effects.
And at the bottom of the column, you talk about CFO, treasurer, functional areas. What are the ones that, in your experience, are making the moves?
That is the horizon. I'm seeing some interesting things being applied, but I'd say that's the new world, and we're seeing it already on the consumer side. And as we know, as consumers, we adapt to new technology, we get addicted to new technology, and that creeps into our business life. So just like mobile banking took off on the consumer side and then was adopted by corporations, I think we'll see corporate treasurers talking to a virtual assistant.
Okay, so if we move on to how advanced AI will change the interface of customer engagement, can you talk us through this? Because this has got an awful lot of concepts and possibilities.
It does. And again, I was trying to underscore where are we today, and that's at the bottom of the chart, and where are we headed. So if you think about today simply as we can easily relay as a bank descriptive data to both our end user, our customer, and our RM. As we apply AI, we can move into stronger predictive. You don't need AI to do predictive analysis, but you can get better results. So you get to predictive type of actions, alerts, and eventually to prescriptive, where you make recommendations. And another thing that changes is today, information's rather static. It sits in a data silo, and unless somebody pulls it, there's not an action taken based on that data. Here, you can have dynamic use of data where there's a machine learning model that's going through daily balances and then saying, oh, I predict this account's going to go below zero, better send an alert. So you have a dynamic, preemptive kind of engagement.
So it's almost dynamic cash flow forecasting, as it were.
Eventually, what could be, kind of the vision of customer bank dynamic, where there's a virtual assistant, so that's the left column, and natural language processing, generation, understanding, plus machine learning is working to push from the descriptive, hey, tell me what I spent at vendor ABC, to how are my balances looking today? Is there an account that I should pay attention to that might go below? Or will there be a big deposit coming into an account that I'll want move out? To things such as payments route optimization. So customer could say, okay, this is a low risk payment. It's a trusted trading partner. It doesn't need to get there today. And the algorithm will say, oh, well, this is your best choice, cheapest in this situation. So you could see some predictive and recommendation coming in. Eventually, and who knows, this is probably 5 years out, just more due to our inability to move as fast as technology. A treasurer could ask virtual bank's virtual assistant to more sophisticated questions such as dynamic cash flow forecasting, or give me a three-way match on this huge invoice we just got, or help us negotiate a contract even. Procurement could leverage this, all the way to bespoke recommendations. Treasurer wakes up, virtual assistant says, you have a big FX exposure coming due in 2 days. What would you like to do? Or here are some options to cover it, and here's the cost. So eventually we'll get there. But I think it's always a test and learn, and you can't have failure here when you're dealing with money transactions. So you're going to start with areas where you can fail easy, it doesn't fail badly, and you can learn and improve.
So how would you envisage what's going to happen on the relationship between the customer and the relationship manager?
Well, I think the relationship manager will have his or her own virtual assistant. They're going to be turbocharged by stronger analytics. They're offloading administrative work to either bots or AI, depending upon the complexities involved, and their job should become easier. They'll be able to be more proactive. So one of the more interesting tools is sentiment analysis. So a customer calls about a payment that didn't get processed, and so the back office troubleshoots, doesn't have a clue that this customer is really pissed. The customer decides to shift some of their cross-border transaction to their second-tier bank, and nobody would know this, but with AI monitoring, they'd say, oh, we have an unhappy customer who their transaction flow just dropped. RM, given this trail of information, we recommend that you call this customer and make it right for them.
But that's blindingly obvious. If you've messed up on a payment more than once, the customer's going to be upset and will take appropriate actions.
Well, the problem is when they don't vocalize it. They take action, but unless you're monitoring their transaction flow, you might not know what adverse consequences this one error caused. So it's very helpful to have this push of data, more knowledge, not the data, but interpretation of the data to the RM.
Sentiment analysis. Okay, so this is absolutely fascinating, and it's also rather scary. What would be your closing comment about where things are going?
First, I'd say on the scary side, there's definitely scary elements. People think about job loss. People think about ethical, moral issues. So addressing the first one, in Treasury, most Treasury areas are working with a lean team, especially if they're working for a tech company and fast growing, and they're just being asked to do more or the same with the same number of FTE. Well, this is a savior, right? Pulls a lot of the admin stuff, data gathering, analysis away from their desktops to machine learning platform, and they can focus on value add. And for the RM, the job gets more interesting. You're not calling back office saying, where is this KYC? You've got a dashboard that shows you. And so you're not spending time in the lower value add stuff. You can focus on customer care and more complex transactions. And you can also get help prospecting. So I think in the front office, there's definitely positive impact. And on the second category ethical moral, you just have to have principles in place when building these models to ensure that they are representing what our ideal state is and not replicating any biases that exist.
Yes, I talked to somebody from booking.com last week, and they were saying you have to be careful, humans are biased. But similarly, AI is biased. Depends who builds it, surely.
Absolutely, and it's all about the data. You want to make sure the data represent what you want the output to be based on, and if your data has biases, then you need to get a better set of data.
Alenka, that was very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Jack. Good to speak with you.